Chapter 2, Tiger Tiger. This lesson has been adapted from the famous story The Jungle Book, written by Rudyard Kipling. When Mowgli left the wolves' cave after the fight with the pack at the Council Rock, he went down to the ploughed land where the villagers lived. But he would not stop there because it was too near the jungle, and he knew that he had made at least one bad enemy at the council. So he hurried on, keeping to the rough road that ran down the valley, and followed it at a steady jog trot for nearly 20 miles, till he came to a country that he did not know. Now, in this part of the story, Mowgli has left the council, the wolf pack, and has left the jungle because he's already had a fight with some of them, since they say that he is a human being and he can never be an animal like them. He can never be a part of the wolves. So he goes down to the villages, but he goes to a village that is very far from the jungle where he used to be. The valley opened out into a great plain, dotted over with rocks and cut up by ravines. At one end stood a little village, and at the other the thick jungle came down in a sweep to the grazing grounds. All over the plain, cattle and buffaloes were grazing, and when the little boys in charge of the herds saw Mowgli, they shouted and ran away, and the yellow barrier dogs that hang about every Indian village barked. Mowgli walked on, for he was feeling hungry, and when he came to the village gate, he saw the big thorn bush that was drawn up before the gate at twilight, pushed on one side. Now, as Mowgli walked for so many miles, he reached the valley where on one side there was a little village, and on the other side there was the jungle. He kept walking, and outside there were fields where the cattle and the buffaloes were grazing, and the boys that were taking care of them were there. As they saw Mowgli, they got scared and they ran away. And the Indian pariah dogs are the street dogs, they too ran off and started barking at Mowgli. But Mowgli kept walking because he was very hungry, and he entered the gate of the village. He said, for he had come across more than one such barricade in his night rambles after things to eat. So, men are afraid of the people of the jungle here also. He sat down by the gate, and when a man came out, he stood up, opened his mouth, and pointed down it to show that he wanted food. The man stared and ran back up the one street of the village, shouting for the priest, who was a big fat man dressed in white with a red and yellow mark on his forehead. The priest came to the gate, and with him at least 100 people, who stared and talked and shouted and pointed at Mowgli. "They have no manners, these men folk," said Mowgli to himself. "Only the grey ape would behave as they do." "What is there to be afraid of?" said the priest. "Look at the marks on his arms and legs. They are the bites of wolves. He is but a wolf child, run away from the jungle." Of course, in playing together, the cubs had often nipped Mowgli harder than they intended, and there were white scars all over his arms and legs. Now, when Mowgli reached at the village gate, he sat down, and a man came out and saw him. Mowgli immediately got up and pointed out at or made a sign that he was hungry, pointing out at his mouth. But the man ran away and called the priest, who was a fat man wearing a white dress and with yellow marks of the tika on his head. And he came with a lot of more people, and they all were shouting and pointing out at Mowgli. And Mowgli felt that they were all very ill-mannered. And the priest said, he's a wolf child. He's from the jungle, a boy who was lost, and he has come back from the jungle. See, there are wolf marks, bites on his body, and they were actually because the cubs would play with Mowgli but would hurt him, not intendedly, because of their sharp teeth and claws. They would hurt him sometimes. "Arre, arre," said 2 or 3 women together. "To be bitten by wolves? Poor child. He is a handsome boy. He has eyes like red fire. By my honor, Mesua, he is not unlike thy boy that was taken by the tiger." "Let me look," said a woman with heavy copper rings on her wrists and ankles, and she peered at Mowgli. "Indeed, he is not. He is thinner, but he has the very look of my boy." The priest was a clever man, and he knew that Mesua was wife of the richest villager in that place. So he looked up at the sky for a minute and said solemnly, "What the jungle has taken, the jungle has restored. Take the boy into thy house, my sister, and forget not to honor the priest who sees so far into the lives of men. By the bull that brought me, said Mowgli to himself, well, if I'm a man I must become." The crowd parted as the woman beckoned Mowgli to her hut, while there was a red lacquered bedstead, a great earthen grain chest with funny raised patterns on it, half a dozen copper cooking pans, an image of a Hindu god in a little alcove, and on the wall a real looking glass, such as they sell at the country fairs. Now, as the women and the people gathered, they saw, oh, this little boy has been bitten by the wolves. And one of them said, there was a lady, Mesua, she had lost her, the tiger had taken her child away. And they said, the women said that this Mowgli looked like her lost son. And so the priest also stepped forward and said that, yes, well, your boy whom the tiger had taken is back. So consider it what the jungle had taken away from you has given back to you. So the lady also, because she was one of the richest woman in the village, The priest thought that he would get some benefit out of it, and by giving this boy to the lady as a son, she also took him to her house which was adorned with utensils, copper utensils, a looking glass on the wall, and a bedstead, that is a bed which was covered with a bed sheet, like a reddish color bed sheet, and all the descriptions of the things that were around. And Mowgli realized that because he is a man, probably he should now live like a human being. So then she gave him a long drink of milk, that is a long glass of milk with some bread, and then she laid her hand on his head and looked into his eyes, for she thought perhaps that he might be her real son come back from the jungle where the tiger had taken him. She thought maybe he is actually her son whom the tiger had taken. So she said, Nathu. Nathu was the name of that boy. Nathu, oh Nathu. Mowgli did not show that he knew the name. Dost thou not remember the day when I gave thee thy new shoes? She touched his foot, and it was almost as hard as horn. No, she said sorrowfully, those feet have never worn shoes. But thou art very like my Nathu, and thou shalt be my son. She told him that, do you remember, Nathu, that I had given you shoes, new shoes? But when she touched his feet were very hard, those feet which had never worn shoes. So she realized that it was not her son Nathu, but perhaps she should take him as her son. Mowgli was uneasy because he had never been under a roof before. He had never had a roof over his head. But as he looked at the thatch, he saw that he could tear it out any time if he wanted to go away, and that the window had no fastenings. He thought that if he had to run away, he could easily tear out the thatch, the covering of the roof, the top of the roof, and even the window was not very strongly locked, so he could easily run away. What is the good of a man, he said to himself at last, if he does not understand man's talk? Now, I am as silly and dumb as a man would be with us in the jungle. I must speak their talk. As soon as Maswa pronounced a word, Mowgli would imitate it almost perfectly, and before dark he had learnt the names of many things in the hut. He was an intelligent boy, Mowgli. So though he had learnt no language, he couldn't understand the language of human beings, he started to imitate every word that she was speaking, and had learnt a lot of words that were of the things that were in the hut. There was a difficulty at bedtime because Mowgli would not sleep under anything that looked so like a panther trap as that hut. Give him his will, said Maswa's husband. Remember, he can never till now have slept on a bed. So he is indeed sent in the place of our son. He will not run away. So Mowgli stretched himself in some long, clean grass at the edge of the field. But before he had closed his eyes, a soft grey nose poked him under the chin. Now, because Mowgli had never slept in a hut, in a closed room, He wanted to sleep in the open. So Maswa's husband said, "Let him sleep. He is like our son. He will not run away." And as Mowgli was about to go to sleep in the field, at the edge of the field, he felt a nose poking at him. "Phew," said Grey Brother. He was the eldest of Mother Wolf's cubs. So the eldest of the wolf's brothers out there in the jungle came to Mowgli. "This is a poor reward for following the 20 miles. Thou smellest of wood, smoke, and cattle, although like a man already. Wait, little brother, I bring news." The wolf, elder brothers of the wolf who came there, he said, "You already smell it. This does not a nice place. It's smelling. And you also smell of the cattle and everything. And I bring news to you. There's some news for you." "Are all well in the jungle?" said Mowgli, hugging him. He asked, how is everyone at the jungle? "All except the wolves that were burnt with the red flower. Now listen. Sher Khan has gone away to hunt far off till his coat grows again, for he is badly sick. When he returns, he swears that he will lay thy bones in the Wenganga. I also have made a little promise, but news is always good. I am tired tonight, very tired, with new things, Grey Brother, but bring me the news always. Thou wilt not forget that thou art a wolf. Men will not make thee forget," said Grey Brother anxiously. "Never. I will always remember that I love thee and all in our cave. But also I will always remember that I have been cast out of the pack." So the brother wolf said that Sher Khan had gone away because his coat has shed, and now as he'll come back later and he will kill Mowgli. So Mowgli said, "I'm very tired, you go, but keep bringing me news of the jungle." And the brother wolf said that, "Remember, you will always be treated as a wolf man. These people, these human beings will never let you forget that." And Mowgli said, "And I will also never forget that I was expelled out of the pack. I was thrown out of the pack. That is why he had to come to the people, the human beings here in the village. And that thou mayest be cast out of another pack. Men are only men, little brother, and their talk is like the talk of frogs in a pond. When I come down here again, I will wait for thee in the bamboos at the edge of the grazing ground." For 3 months after that night, Mowgli hardly ever left the village gate. He was so busy learning the ways and customs of men. First, he had to wear a cloth around him, which annoyed him horribly. And then he had to learn about money, which he did not in the least understand, and about flying, of which he did not see the use. Then the little children in the village made him. So the brother wolf told Mowgli that, "I would come every time and meet you, and you should meet me close to the bamboo fields that are there." And Mowgli in the meantime would hardly leave the village, because he was learning a lot of things. He learned how to plow, or wearing the clothes around himself on his body, and learning about money, learning about plowing, and so many other things which he really never understood much, but he did learn them. And the children, because they would make fun of him, they made him very angry. And when they made fun of him because he would not play games or fly kites, or because he mispronounced the words, only the knowledge that it was unsportsmanlike to kill little naked cubs kept him from picking them up and breaking them in two. He did not know his own strength in the least. In the jungle, he knew he was weak compared with the beasts, but in the village, people said that he was as strong as a bull. Now, the children would make fun of him because he wouldn't fly kites and do things like the other children in the village did. But he knew that he was very strong in front of these children or the people of the village. Though he was weak in front of the beasts of the jungle, here he was considered a strong person because he knew and he could break things, he could do a lot of things which these children of the village could not. So this is the story of Mowgli when he reached the village.